Welcome to Truth Be Told, where we believe in experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet. Joining me now in studio is your other host, Captain Ron, and we have a great show for you lined up today. We have the Executive Director and CEO of Edgar Cayce's Association for Research and Enlightenment. Kevin has been both a student and a teacher of Cayce's material for over 35 years. He has lectured all over the world. He's a prolific writer. He's the author of more than 25 books, including Edgar Cayce on reincarnation and family karma. And we are going to dive into the world of Edgar Cayce, Akashic Records, spiritual growth, vibrations, karma, and we're going to find out a little bit more about Edgar Cayce and his impact on the spiritual world of today. So please welcome to Truth Be Told, where we believe in experience becomes truth, Kevin Todeschi. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Tony, Captain Ron, thanks for having me on the program.
Our pleasure. We are excited to have you here because I think I've been doing this for over 3.5, or actually almost 4 years now, and over 450 shows, and we've never had anybody on the show to talk about.
That's amazing.
Edgar Cayce.
Ever. That is amazing.
Cayce's a staple in this world.
I know. This is what
I mean. This is a.
He started it all.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this. I'm excited that we're going to
So when we booked you, we were like, oh my God, this is the mother lode of Edgar Cayce and his history and his impact on the world. And most people may have heard his name, at least in the spiritual world. They should have in the paranormal world. But some people may not know who Edgar Cayce is. So could you please, if you don't mind, just kind of give us a little bit about who Edgar Cayce is to us as a society and who he was as a person.
Sure. Edgar Cayce lived between 1877 and 1945. For 43 years of his adult life, he found that he could put himself to sleep on a couch. We still have the couch in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And while in that sleep state, he could respond to virtually any question imaginable. The answers he gave to questions became called readings. He hired a secretary to take down everything that he said. His wife usually conducted the readings. And during the period of 43 years, Cayce mentioned 10,000 different topics. So whether it's how past life works, how to cure yourself of a disease, how to get along better with your spouse or your friends, how to meditate, how to have a closer walk with God, you name it. People just like you and I ask Edgar Cayce the same kind of question interested today. Mm-hmm. And that's really what began the work. Cayce's dream was to have a hospital because much of the work had to do with physical well-being and curing illnesses. And eventually they built a hospital in Virginia Beach, Virginia, where he would give readings and patients would come for the treatment. He'd give a reading and then doctors, nurses, therapists would carry out the treatment. We still have the hospital building, but today it's a spa. And we basically do every kind of treatment Cayce talked about except surgery. We have a chiropractor, we have spa, we have osteopathy, we have acupuncture, we have steams, massages, you name it. But that's really who Edgar Cayce was.
Well, hold on, Kevin. What do you guys consider him to be then? Like, if somebody didn't know about this, I mean, I've known that he did these readings. Do they consider him a psychic? Do they consider him a medium? What is that? What do they consider him as?
He would not call himself a medium because a medium generally suggests that someone else is speaking through you. And Cayce would say that it was his own higher self speaking. He called himself either a psychic diagnostician or a clairvoyant. Most often we say he's the most documented psychic of all time or the father of holistic medicine because 9,000 of the 14,000 readings we have copies of are really about medicine and healthcare. But like I said, he mentioned an amazing number of topics. The second most major category would be topic of reincarnation and how the soul's journey works. But he gave people business advice. He talked about inventions. He talked about child rearing. He talked about education. You name it, people found that his information was helpful, so they asked him any question about imaginable. And it's really because of that. There's about 300 books have been written about Edgar Cayce and his information.
Well, I know I work a lot with psychics and mediums today. You know, Jane Van Prock, Char Margolis, all they've had shows here or still have shows here. And I know I grew up in the Midwest, and he grew up and born and raised in Kentucky. I know how Christians looked at least psychics today and say
Well, he was Christian.
Well, I know, but I'm just thinking about how a lot of Christians look at psychics and mediums today, still not in a positive way. It's changing, but I couldn't imagine what they looked at Edgar Cayce back 100 years ago. How was he? Because it seems like a lot of people followed him, believed in him, but how did society look at him at that time? At least when he started with his predictions.
Well, it was mixed because people often came to him as a last resort for their health problems, and they had been to many major medical places throughout the country, including the Mayo Clinic. And very often they'd come to Cayce as a last resort, and when they get cured, very often they'd say, well, boy, if Cayce's correct about this, maybe he's correct about reincarnation. So he had a lot of fans related to health. That said, when his biography, There Was a River, came out in 1943, when he was still alive, and talked about his belief in reincarnation, he was basically excommunicated from the church that he had been a leader in and a most popular Sunday school teacher. So that really ripped his heart out, so to speak, because he had found a way to reconcile a strong faith in Jesus and a strong belief in reincarnation. And a lot of people had a challenge with that. But I would say more and more today, many Christians are interested in reincarnation. I think Unity Church is a great example of that.
Right.
A lot of Catholic churches actually are open to the idea as well. It just depends on the religion and the people. But he did have a hard time for some of his life in terms of finding people who were open to all the topics. If he just talked about one or two things, that would have been one thing. But he talked about 10,000 different things.
Right, and that's what's so fascinating about him, where even modern day you don't have a lot of psychics that they're very specific.
He feels very different than a typical psychic.
Yeah,
and that's why I wondered what they call him, because he seems so different. He's such a unique thing. May I ask a question of Kevin? Kevin, you described him, how he laid there and he gave these readings. Can you kind of speak to what that meant? Because I know, supposedly he thought he could touch all time and space and tapped into the universal unconsciousness. Is that the Akashic record, or is it something else? What was he tapping into? How did he do this, or think that he did this?
He said he got his sources of information from two sources. The major source was the Akashic Records, which he described as, if you can imagine the planet Earth, that the Earth is surrounded by an etheric force field, let's say. And he would say that anything that ever happens in the Earth is written in this force field, in this field. And as unusual as that might sound to some, you've probably all heard of a near-death experience, and how when people have near-death experience, they have kind of like a life review and see everything that they did in their life, and then they're awakened and they don't die. Cayce would say that what's happening is they're actually reading their own life review, and that he was somehow able to tap into that source of information and get information from all time and space from there.
So he would read everyone's Akashic record, is what you're saying?
He could read anybody's Akashic record. Now, he would also say that most often each and every one of us do that as well, not to the same level, but we meet someone for the very first time and we don't like that person, or we meet someone and we really have a connection to that person. And where does that come from? We're picking up on our connection to this person from the Akashic record all the time.
Really?
All the time, yeah.
So what is your background? Are you a psychic, medium, intuitive, or how did you get involved with the Edgar Cayce Institute, I guess?
How I got involved was when I was 15. I was going to school in Colorado, and a high school teacher recommended me for Boys State, which is where you go and you learn about the government and the judiciary and all that. And honestly, I think Boys State is great, but by Wednesday I was kind of bored out of my mind. So I went to the bookstore, and the book that jumped out at me was called A Prophet in His Own Country, The Story of the Young Edgar Cayce by Jess Stern. And it was so fascinating that I came home and I told my parents when I graduated, I'm supposed to move to Virginia Beach. And that became that was my goal. And between that book and graduation, I read everything I could find on Cayce. There was a series of Warner paperbacks back then. And I became and I joined the local speakers team. We have speakers teams all over. We have study groups all over, ecumenical groups, learn how to meditate and work with their dreams and things. And I joined. That's the book right there. Yeah? I joined and became very much committed to the organization. And when I graduated from college, I moved here. All my work experience was actually finance. I was assistant to the vice president of the largest bank in Denver. So when I started at A.R.E, I was in accounting, but I moved on from there after about a year and a half.
I bet, because the difference between what you were doing, the right brain and left brain, that's a complete opposite. And so, did you feel a change when you that, like a light bulb that went off, and a change in yourself when that realization that's the direction you wanted to go?
It was almost like a destiny. It felt like this is what I was born for. I mean, it really felt that strong. And I am a Gemini, so that's the two sides of the. And all my school experience was English. I had a degree in English, so it made for a nice mix between all my work experience, finance, and all my school English. And so it helped out later on when I started writing articles and then books.
I want to go back to Edgar Cayce when he used to be able to heal.
Yes. Well, he didn't heal. He gave readings on how people could get. Yeah.
But I mean, to like you said, the advice of healing. So I want to know, what was his technique, how did he actually? Did he go into a trance? Did he? Because like a lot of psychics I work with here, they don't really go into a trance. They just kind of blurt it out, and here you go. Now, did he have a routine, a spiritual journey that he had to go on into a trance or a meditation? How did it work?
He did. He would get his secretary sitting next to him to write down everything he said. His wife would be at his head, because early on he had let his father lead some readings, and he didn't know why, but every time his father did it, he'd wake up with a tremendous headache. He found out later that in addition to the reading, his father would get tips on the local horse races and then send someone out to do a bet.
Oh my God!
And he was doing very well at the track, but Cayce was making himself sick because he didn't know what was happening. So after that happened, he would never give another reading unless his wife was present, because he felt like someone was misusing him, and it was his own father.
So it's like unconscious then. Like he didn't even know what he was saying.
He didn't know what he was talking about. He would just wake up feeling sick and have a headache. And his father was always walking around with extra change in his pocket. So something was going on. But what would happen when it worked right, when his wife was leading and his secretary was sitting there, is he'd close his eyes, fold his hands over his solar plexus. He'd start to pray. And as soon as, the way he described it, as soon as he saw a brilliant flash of light in his mind, he would move his hands and then just start to go to sleep. And his wife would watch for his eyelids to flutter. And as soon as she saw that, she would give him a suggestion, because if he didn't, he'd go right to sleep. And instead she would say things like, you will find this person, giving their name, located at so-and-so, giving their address. You will give this person, look at this person's body, outline a regimen of treatment, tell what's wrong with them, and he would give a reading. And interestingly enough, very often, when, let's say, he had an appointment for someone in New York, he would tune into the person at the time, and he might say something like, he's not here. He's late on a bus coming across town. And whenever possible, Hewlin would get up, go to the phone, call them, and see, in fact, that's exactly what happened. So, or he'd tune into the person and say, well, they're wearing funny red pajamas, or there's beautiful pictures in the hallway. And so he had this ability. His mind was almost like traveling to where it was, and he would be able to see what was going on there and describe it in the reading. And so all those evidences of clairvoyance are outlined in the readings. So he would do that, tune into the person, see what was wrong with them, outline regimens of treatment. Sometimes he'd recommend doctors that were nearby that he didn't know about consciously. I will say that one of the reasons I got so committed to the organization is when I went to college, I used to get 6 allergy shots a week, 3 twice a week. And I started working with the Cayce material on allergies, and I don't even take pills anymore. And it just worked perfectly for me. So it was another aha, this really works.
So he was kind of a holistic healer at that time, or what we call a holistic healer.
Yeah, holistic to the extent that he drew from every school of medicine. And I mean, he did recommend surgery. He did recommend prescription medication. He did recommend change of diet, change of attitudes and emotions, chiropractic adjustments. So his dream when he built the hospital was to really have a hospital where practitioners from every discipline work together to help promote the healing of the patient. That was his ideal.
So, again, a lot of people that I've talked to, just kind of like your aha moment when you read the book, did Edgar Cayce have a near-death experience that activated the abilities, or did he always have the ability even as a young child?
Well, that's an interesting question because he did have a near-death experience that helped to activate his ability, but it was not in this lifetime. He actually talked about how this
Oh,
part of his
fascinating.
ability to do this had happened in ancient Persia
Huh.
when he had nearly been killed in battle, and he had an out-of-body experience and survived. And he said it was from that experience that he could, whenever he wanted, leave his body consciously. So that's very interesting. You should mention that. But in terms of this lifetime, he was always very psychic, but he thought it was normal. I mean, he could see invisible playmates that nobody else could see, and he just assumed everybody else could see them. He could see colors around people, and he just assumed everybody else could see them.
You wouldn't know.
When he was 10, he fell asleep on his reading book, and when he woke up, he had memorized the content of the book, so much so that his father could read out a page, and he could describe everything on that page. That's great for social studies or for English, but it doesn't help you do a math problem.
Right.
So, it just depends on the topic.
So
But
clear. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so clearly he believed in reincarnation then, if this happened to him in a previous lifetime.
He didn't at first when he first mentioned it, and he mentioned it as early as 1911, but eventually it started to make sense to him because he could see how, in fact, he decided one year to read the Bible from cover to cover with the idea of reincarnation in mind, and found literally dozens of examples of reincarnation in the Bible. And then actually he and his wife had three children. Two of them lived to adulthood, but the middle son died as an infant because Cayce didn't give the child a reading. And he felt very bad about that. And then his wife got very sick, and finally he gave her a reading, and her success being healed is what committed him to giving readings. But about 10 years passed, 15 years, and that child that died, he recognized when someone else came with their child for a reading. And so that convinced him that there really is something to this business of reincarnation.
Yeah, and I know I've heard and read about his thoughts about being reincarnated after his death.
Well, usually that's taken out of context.
So
but
could you explain that?
Scoop.
Yeah, give me the real scoop, because I've heard multiple stories.
Well, first of all, let me say there are so many people claiming to be the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce.
Oh, I'm one. No, I'm just kidding.
We have a form letter for it, and I'm not kidding. We have a form letter for it. That said, when he was giving a reading once in Detroit, he was actually arrested for practicing medicine without a license. And he was sent to jail, and he was in jail for several days, and he was depressed to the depths of his soul because he felt like he was already, sometimes having a hard time finding people who were brave enough to get a reading, even though there was a great success rate. And two, if he was supposed to do this work, why did he get arrested? And finally, his son got him out of jail, and he was on the train coming back from Detroit. And on the train, he had this dream. And in the dream, he saw that he was a little boy born again in Nebraska, which in the dream was a coastline city, and that he remembered being Edgar Cayce, and they took him to places in Virginia Beach and in New York, and there was evidence of his work that was still alive, and the year was 2108. So from that dream, people will say, well, Edgar Cayce said Nebraska will be the coastline, and that he would be born again in 2108. He actually gave a reading on that dream. And in the reading twice, he says, this is the interpretation. So it's pretty clear. This is the interpretation. Though the heaven and earth be removed, your work will survive. In other words, even if you're arrested for practicing medicine without a license, 200 years from now, your work is still going to be around. And so it was to encourage him that regardless of what had happened, he would still, his work would live on. And that is still the case to this day. Actually, when Edgar Cayce was alive, he gave readings for about 5,800 people.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
Right now on our website, every Monday, we get more than 10,000 people coming to our website. Every Monday, unique users. A Monday is always our busiest day. And my guess is people come back from the weekend, and about midday, they get bored out of their mind at work. And so they start surfing the web. Is the only thing I can figure out. But more than 2 times as many people come every day as went to Edgar Cayce in his lifetime.
So you said he had two children that went into adulthood.
Right.
Did either one of the children have the gift?
Not in terms of giving psychic readings. Hugh Lynn Cayce, who was really the individual who ran the organization when I first got involved 35 years ago, he was very good at dreams and dream interpretation. He was very good at helping people with personal guidance. He was a great great speaker, but no, he was not a professional psychic. And his other son was an engineer with the power company in Virginia. Both have passed away. But yeah, there's Hughley and Cayce right here. He was one of the best speakers you ever wanted to hear.
Have you come across anyone else that's anything like Cayce at all? Because he seems so unique, like he had this ability to tap into this record. Has anyone else? I've never heard of anything else other than him.
Well, I've heard of a lot of people tap into the records, but like you
I mean, the
said,
way
he's
he did,
so
the way
unique
he could.
about the ability to, like, as a whole.
Yeah, I would say I've met a half a dozen, maybe a dozen psychics who have been very impressive. We do programs in Virginia Beach all the time where we bring together psychics or mediums that are just incredible. People like Carolyn Mace, Robert Brown, John Holland, those kinds of people are just, they really have a gift. And so, yes, I have met people like that.
So you
A.R.E.
feel like
also
they're the
has
same thing as him, sort of.
No, it's not the same, but I think they're just as helpful in a different way.
Interesting.
I've seen Robert Brown make people who have lost a child finally have a healing there because they feel like they're communicating with that child. So I think that's really what the best use of psychic ability is to somehow promote a healing, whether it's a physical healing, an emotional healing, a spiritual healing, or a mental healing.
So I know Edgar has, like I said, really has impacted the world, not just in his time period, but I feel even today. What is your thoughts on that? How do you feel that his work is still affecting us today? Where, there's a lot of people, what they do is great, but once they're gone, they may not have the impact as he did. So how do you feel that he still impacts us today?
Well, I can tell you that in Virginia Beach, we're one of the busiest tourist attractions in Virginia Beach. I sometimes jokingly say because we're free, but it's not limited to Virginia Beach. There are Edgar Cayce centers in 38 countries. Mm-hmm. The next biggest country is Japan. They have monthly lectures. They have over 1,000 members right in Tokyo. I've been to Japan 3 times. Right now in Shanghai, China, there are 3,000 young people under 30 who stay in constant communication with a Cayce newsletter that is sent via WeChat. My book on contemporary Cayce is currently being translated into Chinese. So I think there is something about the Cayce information that helps people understand the oneness of God, the spiritual nature of humankind, and the purposefulness of life that is really at the heart of why we're here. And I think that impetus makes his information global. And he is more popular today than he ever was during his lifetime.
Kevin, why don't you tell people how, don't you guys now have all of his readings digitized online, that if you join, you can have access to any one of his readings? This is one of the most amazing things I think you guys have.
Yeah, actually, when his secretary, Gladys Davis, passed away in 1986, and I got to know her for about 5 or 6 years before she passed away, and she began the project. She oversaw the project. We had efficiency experts come in and look at all the material that Gladys had taken down by hand, saying it would take 6 people working full-time at least 6 years to put the Cayce readings on computer. It took about 7 years. It's 24 million words. But they've all been digitized. And if you are a member anywhere in the world, you can access any of the 14,306 readings on all 10,000 different topics. You can type in a topic and it will come up. In addition to that, whether or not you're a member, if you go to edgarcayce.org, you can go to our health pages and you can look up about 500 illness protocols. What did Edgar Cayce have to say about psoriasis or allergies or asthma? And you can look at the protocols now from wherever you are. We just put it up there for everybody.
I'm going to ask this, and I know it's going to be asked a lot, but because there's so many. Was there something or one reading or experience that you read about Edgar Cayce when he was working with somebody else that really either touched you or felt like it was almost you? Was there one reading that just stood out to you that you could share with us?
Well, I mean,
I know that's a lot. I know it's a lot because he did so many, but I'm just curious because I have not had the opportunity to read them yet. So,
I would say that. How about if I give you 2, and then I don't feel guilty about it?
Okay.
So, there was a young woman who had been all over to various clinics, including the Mayo Clinic. Doctors prescribed that her hip had cancer and that it was eating itself. They decided it was terminal, that she probably wouldn't make it into her 20s. She was only 17.
Wow.
She came to the Edgar Cayce Hospital. He cured her within a matter of months. And she became, and while she was there, he talked to her about the fact how in ancient Egypt, she had drawn life seals, that she could meet somebody, and then just by talking to them, she could decide what their strengths were and how they could more readily cultivate those strengths in the present. So she drew all these amazing life seals. So I actually eventually wrote a book called Cayce on Soul Symbolism that incorporates much of what she said about what we can learn from life seals. And so I would have to say that case history, that reading really inspired me. And then this woman went on to live into her 80s.
Wow.
And so she did not pass away. So that would be one health reading that was really inspiring. Certainly the readings on health related to allergies were inspiring as well. I would say in terms of the philosophy material, Tom Segru, who wrote Cayce's biography, There Is a River, got a series of readings on why God created souls, why are we here on earth, what is the purpose of life, and that philosophy overview became an entire chapter in his book There Is a River. And I was so inspired by that when I was 17 years old, this is before scanners, before computers, before anything, I actually retyped that whole chapter out so I could have copies to pass out to my friends. So I would say that philosophical information truly transformed my life, why we're here and what we're supposed to be doing about it.
Perfect. Well, I think we're going to take just a quick break because when we come back, I want to talk about some of your work because you have a lot of books that you've written. You've put a lot of time into, and it's been inspired by Edgar Cayce. So I think it's definitely something that we need to talk about. So this is Truth Be Told. I'm Tony Sweet. This is Captain Ron. We're talking to the amazing Kevin Todeschi, right?
Todeschi, perfect.
Yeah.
You don't have to say Todeschi, but you can just say
because
Todeschi.
I didn't want to screw it up, which I usually do. So we're going to be right back with more with Kevin. Don't go anywhere. Do you suffer from anxiety, from depression, maybe even chronic pain? Well, listen up. Truth Be Told is going to tell you about a breakthrough program built on over 100 years of therapies used in America's returning veterans to help you successfully overcome PTSD, anxiety attacks, pain, and depression. The secret proven in study after study. Music therapy. The effects of music are nothing short of amazing. From strokes to PTSD, music has been shown to improve the quality of life. Now, one of the latest music therapy programs being used in America's veteran hospitals can be yours to experience for free at home and to help your own anxiety attacks, pain, and depression. Or just relax after a hard day. It's called Whole Tones. It takes music therapy to a new level. This revolutionary program makes use of specifically designed frequencies that have been shown to stimulate your body's natural healing power down to a cellular level. If it works for battle-scarred vets, can it work for you? Well, experience it for yourself for free at sweetwholetones.com. Like Tony Sweet, that's SWEET. Go to sweetwholetones.com. Now enjoy the show. Do you suffer from?
We are back on Truth Be Told. I am Captain Ron with Tony Sweet. This is Kevin Todeschi oh, okay. Tony likes to say
See,
Todeschi.
you thought I screwed up.
No, I was doing it on purpose, Tony. There's a difference.
Okay.
We're thrilled to have Kevin tell us about Edgar Cayce, who's just a fascinating figure in history. And since this show is Truth Be Told, we like to talk about a lot of these kind of paranormal things in Egypt and whatnot. Kevin, would you mind indulging us and telling us a little bit about, I know that Cayce spoke of Egypt, and he had that whole thing about the Hall of Records underneath the paw of the Sphinx, I believe, and maybe in another place on Earth, I think, too. Can you talk to that for us a little bit?
I had the opportunity to go to Egypt 6 times. We do tours around the world, and up until the Arab Spring a dozen years ago or so, we used to go every year. We'll go back eventually as well. But Cayce gave about 1,000 readings that mention Egypt. Part of what happened was when he was giving past life information to individuals, he talked about where they had been in past lives. And the Egyptian culture actually had been around for many, many thousands of years. So quite obviously, and many of those people were told that they had lifetimes in ancient Egypt. Well, this came up over and over and over again. And pretty soon, Gladys, who was Edgar Cayce's secretary, and Hugh Lin, who was Edgar Cayce's eldest son, noticed a lot of the connections of people who had been in ancient Egypt and the fact that they, in all likelihood, had connections in the past. And they wondered if those same kinds of relationships, positive and negative, would be picked up in the present. And they found that they were, that somehow we carry over our same frustrations with one another, our same likes, our same dislikes. Cayce, as an aside, Cayce would say that we have to eventually learn how to love everyone with unconditional love. But Cayce did say that the pyramid was built much longer ago than is claimed, that it was built approximately 10,000 years ago, that it was built on the center of the geographic landmass on the earth, that the Sphinx was built to represent the what remained of the Atlantean type creatures that were half man, half beast. And that he also went on to say that he had started to work in ancient Egypt when he had been a high priest named Ra-Ta and had been instrumental in the country for a while. And that he also added that anybody who became a part of the organization and connected with it in the present, basically for their lifetime, had also been connected in ancient Egypt. And so that began really a lifelong exploration for Hugh Lin, who I think probably went to Egypt 20 times over the years, and lots of information on ancient Egypt.
Did they have the Hall of Records? Did he look into that when he was there, or did he?
Cayce talked about how there was a Hall of Records beneath the left paw of the Sphinx, and so over the years, A.R.E has done things that many people don't know about. Zahi Hawass, actually, who was the curator of the Giza Plateau, he was sent through school because of Hugh Lin, made it possible for him to have the funding to become a doctor. Eventually, when Zahi was doing some sewage replacements in Cairo, they needed a big drill that they didn't have the money for. They contacted us, and we said, John Van Auken at the time was overseeing the project. He said that we would give them the drill if they drilled under the paw of the Sphinx at an angle to see if there was anything there. When they got the drill, they did, and they found an open chamber filled with water underneath the bedrock. But that's really all that has been found at this point. If you go to our webpage, it's edgarcayce.org, and type in ancient mysteries, you can come across a lot of the various research projects we've done in Egypt, in Bimini, in the Yucatan, because Cayce said that in those three places there were actually records of the Atlantean civilization that had been buried.
Wow.
For some point in the future.
There's been speculation too that people have taken these records from underneath the Sphinx and they're just not telling us, or they're not, maybe before Hawass, or maybe Hawass himself. There's been,
because they might have information.
There has been that rumor that I've heard as well. But I think eventually it will come out that humankind has been on this planet much longer than we think, and that we've reached heights of civilization bigger than we think before. And just as we destroyed ourselves in the past, we have the potential to do that again.
Unfortunately, we're going in that direction. Let me ask this here, Atlantis. Tell us his theory and what his vision was of Atlantis.
He believed that Atlantis was the height of civilization in many respects, that it was a civilization that was at its height from about 50,000 BC to about 10,000 BC, that the people were very advanced culturally, that unfortunately a large portion of those people forgot their spiritual origins, forgot their connection to the divine. They became very materialistic, focused on their own wealth and technology. Eventually that technology undermined them, and they had a crystal that basically made lighter than air travel possible, all kinds of things, energy possible. And because of that crystal exploding, that it broke the Atlantean continent into several different islands. And eventually those islands sunk around 10,000 BC, which is the cataclysm of Atlantis that Plato talks about.
Wow. Well, you've been working, like you said, with the Edgar Cayce theory and a student, and now leading it for you, like you said, for 42 years. Is that correct?
I've been involved for 42, on staff for 35, and CEO for 11.
Pretty good.
You've definitely have picked up a lot of the traits, I'm sure, of his theories. And I want to talk. We've talked about the Akashic Records, and this is your book right here, Edgar Cayce on the Akashic Records. What made you want to put your own words on paper and start writing books? And let's start with the Akashic Records. I know this is one of your favorites to talk about.
Well, quite frankly, sometimes the Edgar Cayce information is challenging to understand. He speaks in very biblical language. He read the Bible through once for every year of his life. Sometimes a sentence might be a whole paragraph long. I'm not making that up. So it's sometimes very hard to understand. And so one of my goals as a writer is to simplify. So if I can understand it and bring it across in a way that's easier to understand, I think it's a win-win for everyone. So that's really why I started writing, to look at some very complicated Cayce concepts and try to reword them in a way that most people could understand. And the interesting thing about the Akashic Records that early on I didn't even understand is that Cayce really separates the information in the records into three different components. One having to do with our past, which is definitely like our past lives, our memory, things like that. But he also talks about the present and how the Akashic Records are somehow connected to the soul's journey, and that they somehow bring together everything what an individual needs in the present to learn the lesson that individual needs to work on. Now, with free will, we can decide we don't want to learn the lesson, or we can put it off for future reference. But the Akashic Records bring to us people, events, experiences in order to help us grow into who we were meant to be. And then the Akashic Records of the future are constantly calculating probabilities. So we've all had the experience that where we may be going somewhere and we're driving somewhere and think, wait, I've already driven here. Or we may be going somewhere and we have a conversation. We think, I've already had this conversation. And we have an experience called deja vu. Cayce would say what's happening is that we are, every night before when we go to sleep, we're actually tuning into our own Akashic Records. We're seeing previews of our future. We have these experiences called deja vu. And what it really is fragmentary dream recall. We are remembering a piece of a dream we had, and then the next morning we wake up and don't remember that's what really happened. But I have had experiences over and over and over and over again where, following Cayce's guidance, you can actually write out a question before you go to sleep and get an answer.
Wow.
And I have found it to be the most valuable tool of personal guidance so far.
I totally believe in that. I mean, I don't do the write down thing, but I cannot tell you how often I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning about a problem that I had the night before.
Oh,
yep.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah,
it's
and
true.
You're tuning into the answer through the Akashic Records, and we all have that capacity. The challenge is we're not culturally predisposed to work with our dreams, and so most often we let them go.
So what about you? What have you learned about your own Akashic Records, of maybe about your past life, or even maybe towards your future lives, or even future on this realm?
Well, let me answer this way. I have learned that regardless of what we're experiencing, regardless of where we're looking for help, that it is really easy to get guidance. If you have time, let me give you a quick example.
Sure.
I used to teach every student that went through our massage school dream interpretation, because when you were massaging someone, sometimes symbols and images come to mind and they need to know how to work on them. And I've told all these students, and we've graduated about 2,300 from maybe 24 different countries. A lot of students, that you can get psychic information in the waking state that is 100% accurate. The only challenge is we need to know how to work with symbolism. That's why I've spent a lot of time working on books on symbolism, like The Best Dream Book Ever, or Edgar Cayce on soul symbolism, or dream images and symbols. So anyway, this young girl came to my office one day. She, the massage school is a 700-hour curriculum, 2 semesters, and she was about to graduate. In 2 weeks, she was going to move back to Michigan, but she told me she had just met a young man at one of the local restaurants, and she felt like they had gone out several times, and she felt like that he might be the one. He might be her husband-to-be, and she didn't know what she was supposed to do, go back to Michigan or stay in Virginia Beach. So I knew that the answer was in her. All I had to do was figure out what it was. So I got 2 pieces of paper. One I wrote Michigan, one I wrote Virginia Beach. I folded them up, mixed them up, and I gave her a piece of paper to hold in her hands, and I said, I want you to imagine yourself somewhere. She said, okay. I said, where are you? She said, I'm in Rome. I said, how do you feel about that? She said, I'm at the Colosseum. So I feel like there's lots of history, but there's lots of conflict. So we wrote all that on the piece of paper. I gave her the other one. I said, okay, where are you? She said, I'm at Chicks Beach, which is a short version of Chesapeake Bay Beach here in Virginia Beach. And I said, how is that? And she said, it's heaven. So we opened up the pieces of paper, and going back home to Michigan was the place with lots of history and lots of conflict. And staying in Virginia Beach and being with her boyfriend was the place that was heaven. So that's the decision she made, and it ended up being the right one. But it is that easy to get guidance if you just know how to bypass your own worries and fears and wants, and just tune into what's really in your subconscious mind.
That's amazing.
I like that.
And I know there's a lot of people in the chat room that are saying they're loving this, and they said thank you for the show today of having someone like yourself on. So just to pass that along. And I want to talk that because, recently, I know, I'm just kind of curious about this one because we just recently had 4 retrogrades. Pluto,
Yes.
Saturn, Mercury, and then what's the other one? I can't remember.
I think we're still in a Mercury retrograde
until next
week.
Until next week. And one of them was dealing with karma. In one of your books, the Edgar Cayce, Reincarnation and Family Karma, I really believe in karma. I mean, I believe it'll come back to you tenfold both ways, positive, negative. But on this one, you're talking about family karma. What was Edgar Cayce's theory on karma? And then let's talk about your book.
Well, the interesting thing is he has a different take on it than most people. He would say that there is definitely karma, but that we don't have karma between people. We only have karma in relationship to someone. So the way I usually think about this is if you have a spouse or a life partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, you probably have all had the experience where you're both describing somewhere you've been or an experience you had, and both of you have a very different memory of what actually went on.
Right.
I mean, and you're both just as certain that you're right. Cayce describes karma the same way, that we do not share karmic memory, that our own karmic memory is with ourselves. And so a past life experience I have with someone, they may have a very different karmic memory of the experience than I do. So what we're constantly working with is our own karmic memory. We have to come to terms with our own karmic memory. We have to forgive whatever hurt we think we were involved with another person, because eventually we have to learn how to love every single person. We have to learn to love that person at work that we can't stand. God loves all of us equally, maybe because he doesn't have to work with that person, but whatever the reason, right. We have to learn how to see the divine in everyone. And so part of what Reincarnation and Family Karma is about is how case histories, both in the present and during Edgar Cayce's time, of how individuals came to terms with challenges in the relationships, as well as how they really worked with very positive experiences in their relationships and what they learned from them. I remember one woman who, she and her sister hated each other. In fact, when they were growing up, one was 8 and one was 5 or 6, I believe. They went out to their father's barn and got white paint and drew a line through the bedroom, and they were not allowed to cross over the line. And they lasted that way till their 70s.
Wow.
When it turned out that the older sister had gotten mad at the younger sister because she had married her husband in a past life. She had actually taken her husband from her and married him, and that had gone with them into the present.
Wow.
And in the end, the older sister had to be taken care of by the younger sister for 3 years. And I interviewed the younger sister, and she said, it was really hard in the beginning because we didn't like each other for 70 years. But towards the end, we started talking things through. And just before she died, the older sister told the younger sister, I hope we can be sisters again.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's the ideal of every relationship, that we become better people for having had the experience to be around everybody else.
How was his relationship with his parents, and did he have siblings, and how if he did, how was this relationship between his siblings?
He had all sisters, and one of his sisters actually helped out in the hospital when the hospital was going. He founded this hospital. I would say he was close to all of his sisters, and they all thought he was brilliant in terms of his knowledge of the Bible and his ability to give a lecture. He was very close to his mother. His mother died early on. And in spite of the fact that his father had abused his psychic gift, his father lived with him until the early 1930s, late 1920s, and then passed away elderly. Edgar Cayce actually was quite young when he died. He was only 67. But I would say he had close family relationships. It was cousins and second cousins that thought he was a little unusual for his psychic work.
They still, mine feel the same way about me. So we're that's similar. That's the similarity. And I want to go back to the dream because this is one of the best dream book ever that you wrote.
And actually, chapter 8 of that is called Conscious Dream Play. It tells people how they can get psychic guidance in the waking state, like I showed with this young woman about Michigan, and how you can get it yourself. I mean, one of the easy things you can do is, let's say you have a question. Let's say Captain Ron wants to know a question. He actually just writes it on a piece of paper, an index card,
Right.
and then he writes 2 more decoy questions and turns all those cards over, mixes them up, and one at a time put your hand on the back of one of those index cards and imagine something, like see yourself in a place or opening a package or seeing a movie or whatever it might be. It doesn't even really matter. And you can do all 3 the same or all 3 different. And then you write down whatever you see. And then when you're done, turn the index cards over. And I guarantee you've answered the question.
Wow.
That's
a good one.
amazing.
I like that it's a practical thing that everybody can try.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I've had many dream interpreters on the show, and I think a lot of people definitely get confused on when they do have a dream. They don't know how to interpret, and they don't know how to decipher and utilize it. And I mean, I'm the same way. Like you said, I dream a lot, and from my problems to even just amazing things that I'm assuming they're probably future. But until we know how to access the ability to activate them, we probably just use useful information that I think that people can get from this book.
Just tying back in quickly with what Captain Ron said, most often dreams contrast and correlate the events of the day. So whatever you've been thinking about, it often comes out in a dream state.
Right.
So you can tell people is instead of trying to interpret the whole dream, if you can just look at the dream and describe the action in one sentence. Someone's running from something, someone's nervous about something, someone's scared of something, someone's really happy about something. That thematic sentence ties into the same thematic idea in waking life. That's what the dream is about. Whatever that description describes in your dream, it's describing the same thing in waking life. Or conversely, if you have an emotion that comes up in the dream, like a lot of joy or a lot of happiness or fear or anxiety, the emotion is a reflection of the same emotion in waking life. So dreams generally look at our waking life and give us another way of looking at whatever's going on.
Wow.
Awesome.
Well, we have about 3 minutes left, and I want you to talk about upcoming events, workshops, opportunities for people to learn more about their gifts or even more about Edgar Cayce, the actual institute itself. Could you tell us some of the things coming up?
Sure. Anyone interested for more information, go to edgarcayce.org. You can be a member of A.R.E. I think right now there's a special for something like $45 where you have access for a year to all the readings. You get our magazine. We also, if you get on our mailing list or become a member, we have programs throughout the country, all the way from California to Maine. I was in Colorado last weekend doing a conference, and a few weeks before that I did one in Florida. So we do programs all over. There are study groups all over where people can either online or in individual homes get together and discuss concepts like meditation and prayer and how to work with your dreams. And, A.R.E. is as close as your computer or your mailbox. It is an amazing organization. And even now, after 42 years, I still find topics I didn't see years ago. About 7 years ago, I came across a reading that talked about the illusion of time. And I had an experience out of time that really amazed me. And the more I looked into it, I realized eventually there are over 100 readings that talk about the illusion of time. And so even now, after all this time, which is an illusion, I still come across topics and insights in the readings that are just mind-boggling. So,
it's so great that they're keeping this alive. The Cayce thing didn't just go away, that this guy did this years ago. This is an ongoing, living, breathing thing.
Absolutely. And,
awesome.
People today, like I said earlier on, people are still wanting to know about their purpose in life and what they're supposed to be doing about their relationships and what they need to do about their allergies or how they can learn how to meditate or what they need to do about this particular pain. And the whole purpose of the organization is really to help people transform their lives physically, mentally, and spiritually. We really specialize in the oneness of God, the purposefulness of life, and the spiritual nature of humankind. And so regardless of your field of inquiry or interest or need, there's something in the Cayce information I think that can be helpful.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think you would have a heyday with our environment right now, with all the stuff we put in our air, and now the.
What if we would have Cayce today? Wouldn't it be just amazing?
Yeah, we need.
Like, I wonder if he'd be able to do what he did back then, or if it'd be exploited, or if it'd be like, how it would fold out. It's.
I mean, I just think it's amazing that, now we have social media, so everything's so instant. Like right now we're on Periscope and Facebook Live to see where he grew his abilities among
he could do live readings
masses.
and everybody could see.
Yeah, it's just it's
amazing.
fascinating. So, Well, Kevin, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate you, and we hope you come back to see us.
I would love to come back, and maybe I can get you guys to come to Virginia Beach, and we'll live stream from Virginia Beach.
You don't have
Awesome.
to ask but one time, because we're going to make that happen. And on our way out, we're going to go ahead and play the welcome to Edgar Cayce TV.
Cool.
But we want to thank Kevin for being on the show. So thank you, Kevin.
Thank you both. Thank you.
All right. Go to edgarcayce.org, get more information, and you can check us out on truthbetoldwebtv.com. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I make sure you go do the same for Edgar Cayce TV on YouTube. And go to listen to us on iHeart, iTunes, Stitcher, all the places this is going to be up. So until then, we'll see you next time.
We'll see you at Contact in the Desert in May.
Contact in the Desert. 1 month from, like 3 weeks.
19th.
Oh, my goodness. It's coming up. All right. Until then, we'll see you next time right here on Truth Be Told.